My shift begins when the world goes quiet, when lights dim, streets empty, and the city exhales into silence. I'm the night security guard at an old public hospital in Buenos Aires, the kind of place that looks like it's been decaying since the late 80s and no one had the heart, or budget, to fix it. That night felt off. The air was heavier. The hum of the monitors had a strange pulse, flickering like dying fireflies. The hallway lights surged twice, casting brief shadows that didn't quite match the furniture. My walkie-talkie crackled in my hand, then went dead, cutting off mid-sentence, like someone on the other end had vanished. But I didn't think much of it. Nights are weird. Hospitals are weirder. I stepped out for a smoke, leaning against the cold concrete, halfway through my cigarette when the main entrance sensor gave a soft chime. I frowned, flicked the ash, and leaned toward the screen. What I saw made me pause. A man had stepped inside, barefoot. There was something wrong about him, something that made my skin crawl before I even knew why. He stood motionless just past the entrance, framed by the flickering overhead light. He didn't speak, didn't look around, just stared forward glassy-eyed, as if he wasn't sure where or when he was. His t-shirt clung to his chest, drenched in sweat, like he'd been running for miles. His lips were dry, cracked, trembling slightly. But what really got me was his eyes, wide open, unblinking, like he was caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. I walked over slowly, my boots echoing on the waxed linoleum. That's when I heard it, his breathing. Shallow, ragged, and uneven. The kind of breath people take when they're trying to hold their fear in, and failing. "Can you help me?" he asked, softly. Not desperate. Just lost. Like the question had surprised even him. I asked if he was hurt, if he needed a doctor, offered him a seat. But he didn't respond. He just kept looking over my shoulder, blinking slow and vacant, like the words weren't registering. I told him to wait right there. Turned around to radio the front desk nurse. Just a few seconds. But when I turned back, he was gone. No footsteps. No sound. The door hadn't chimed again. It was like he'd been wiped from reality, erased from the hallway, as if he was never really there at all. I checked every corner of the floor, ran past the elevators, even opened the stairwell doors. Nothing. The next night, it was close to 3 a.m. when I heard the sensor chime again. My pulse spiked instantly. I looked at the monitor and there he was, standing in the same exact spot, barefoot, staring at the ceiling. I got up slowly, keeping my hand near the walkie, and walked out to the hallway. He hadn't moved. He looked worse. His face was pale and his eyes were glassy, like he hadn't slept in days. I approached him carefully, not wanting to startle him again, and asked him again if he needed help. This time, he didn't speak. I asked where he went the night before. He just kept looking up like the ceiling had something written on it. "Do you remember me? You came in last night." He slowly turned his head to look at me, his mouth twitching slightly, like he was trying to say something, but couldn't form the words. I asked if he had family, if someone was looking for him. He shook his head. I asked what he remembered. He said nothing at first, then stammered that he didn't know who he was. His hands began to shake. Suddenly, he broke down. He clutched his face, began crying violently, knees buckling as he tried to stay upright. He kept repeating that he didn't know what was happening, that everything felt wrong, like he woke up in the wrong world. Before I could reach him, he turned and bolted down the hallway. I ran after him, but by the time I got to the corridor's end, he was already gone. I checked every room. I even opened the emergency exit and looked down the stairwell. Nothing. It was like he vanished mid-sprint. But this time, it didn't feel like a hallucination. The air felt charged, not heavier, meaner. The next afternoon before my shift, 2 of the morning guards pulled me aside. They looked uncomfortable, like they didn't want to be the ones to say what they had to say. One of them had copied some surveillance footage to a flash drive. He loaded the video on a laptop and I saw myself standing in the hallway at 2:58 a.m. Talking to someone, gesturing, pausing like I was listening, but no one was there. Just me, waving my arms, nodding, pacing slightly. Then, if it wasn't already weird enough, the front door slid open on their own, triggering the sensor exactly when he would have walked in. But on the footage, the doors just opened to nothing. They closed again 20 seconds later. No one visible. I stared at that screen for a full minute trying to process what I was seeing. I swore on my life I talked to someone. He was right in front of me. The guards didn't laugh. They didn't joke. One of them looked pale. He whispered that weird stuff happens here sometimes. That I wasn't the first to talk to someone that wasn't there. That night during my shift, nothing happened. The hospital was quieter than usual. I couldn't even hear the usual metal creaks from the pipes. When I got home, my head was spinning from lack of sleep. I threw my bag on the floor, collapsed on the mattress, and closed my eyes. I should have checked if I was alone. I opened my eyes because something felt wrong. Not the usual kind of wrong. Wrong like someone was standing right beside me. He was at the foot of my bed. The same man, but different. His skin was torn open in places, raw like he'd been dragged across asphalt. His arm was twisted unnaturally, dangling from his shoulder. His jaw was dislocated and hanging to one side. One eye was swollen shut. Now I remember I was confused. I didn't know where to go. I ran outside of the hospital. I was very scared. And then I saw a car coming at me at full speed. After that, everything was even more confusing. His voice was broken, wet. He took a step forward and I scrambled up, heart racing, staring at him. He didn't chase me. He just looked devastated. You have to help me. I'm cold. Very cold. I see them. They're like shadows. They're coming for me. I don't know who they are, but I feel they want to take me to a place even colder. I don't want to go. I'm scared. I ran full sprint, didn't look back. I never ran that fast in my whole life. I dove under the kitchen table, crouched there like a kid. The footsteps came slow, measured, closer. He knelt beside the table and began crying. Not quiet tears, loud, helpless sobs. I felt bad for him, but I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Then everything went silent. When I peeked out, he was gone, just gone. But something in the air felt final, like he had said what he needed. The next morning, I didn't bother clocking in. I went straight to records. I didn't ask for permission. I just walked in and searched the reports from the last 3 days. Eventually, I found it. A male approximately 30 years old brought in by ambulance after being struck by a car outside the hospital gates. Time of death 4:11 a.m. Unidentified, no ID, no phone, barefoot, same shirt, died on impact, face partially destroyed from the crash. I gave a description. The nurse pulled the record. She paused when she read it and then looked up at me, visibly uncomfortable. She told me it matched. No one claimed the body. They buried him anonymously in a city cemetery. I remember staring at the screen, hands shaking, realizing he came back not to haunt me, but to remember himself. A few days later, I bought white flowers and took them to the cemetery. They buried him under a cement marker with no name, just a number and a date. I sat by it for an hour. Didn't say much. I just stayed in case he was still listening. I never saw him again. Music. My name is Luis Ortega. I used to work night shifts as a security guard at a supermarket on the outskirts of Monterrey. I had just finished doing the first round of the building and was heading back to the office to rest a bit when I saw someone or something standing at the far end of aisle 14. It was still too still, standing directly under the emergency light, which was barely working, blinking every few seconds like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay alive. At first, I thought it was a customer who got locked in, but the store had closed at 9 o'clock, and I had personally checked every section 30 minutes earlier. I took a step forward and turned on my flashlight, pointing it straight ahead. The figure didn't move. It looked like a person, but something was off. The posture wasn't natural. It stood stiff, almost like it had been frozen in the middle of something. I yelled out, told them to identify themselves, but I got no answer. My voice echoed down the aisle and bounced back like the place was mocking me. I walked toward it, picking up my pace. I had one hand on my belt where they make us keep a baton, even though I'd never used it in 2 years. But just before I reached the spot, the figure vanished. It didn't run. It didn't hide. It was just gone, like it had never been there at all. I searched the nearby aisles, checked behind the shelves, and even looked above in case someone was trying to mess with me from the storage racks, but there was nothing. I rushed back to the office, heart racing. I pulled up the camera feed from the last few minutes, rewound to the exact moment I saw the figure, and pressed play. What I saw made my stomach twist. There was nothing. No shadow, no shape, no one but me walking down the aisle like a lunatic talking to empty air. I watched it again. Same result. I double-checked the timestamps. Everything matched. The system had recorded every second except for the figure. It wasn't there. I tried to calm myself down. I started recording with my phone. I pointed it at the same aisle and zoomed in, hoping maybe the camera would catch something that the security system had missed. For a second, I thought I was losing it. But then I saw it again on my screen, clear as day, a human figure standing at the end of the aisle. No details, just a black outline. It didn't move, but it was there. And my hands started shaking. I walked fast, this time keeping the camera up and the flashlight pointed ahead. Each step felt heavier than the last. My boots echoed in the silence. I kept expecting to hear another pair of footsteps behind mine, but the only sound was my breathing getting louder. When I got to the end of the aisle, just like before, nothing was there. The space was completely empty. I checked my phone. The screen was blank. The video stopped on its own. I stood still for a moment, trying to catch my breath and tell myself that stress and exhaustion were messing with me. Then from behind me, a sharp noise broke the silence. A glass jar fell off of one of the shelves and hit the floor right next to my foot. I turned around and caught it before it shattered. It was a jar of strawberry jam. I held it confused, and then I heard a slow creeping sound behind me. Before I could even fully turn around, 3 more jars fell. Then 5. Then an entire row came crashing down. Glass exploded all around me. Red sticky jam splashing against my boots and pants. The air filled with the sharp smell of sugar and vinegar. I jumped back and screamed without even thinking, ducking as jars kept raining down like someone was throwing them on purpose. As I tried to escape, something grabbed my ankle and yanked hard. I hit the floor with a thud, pain shooting up my spine. I kicked and twisted, desperate to get loose, but the grip was solid and cold like a metal clamp. I dragged my flashlight across the floor and pointed it in front of me, and I froze. What I saw made my blood stop. There was a little girl kneeling right in front of me. But she wasn't just any girl. The left side of her face was gone. Not damaged. Gone. What remained was skull, exposed bone, and a hollow socket where her eyes should have been. The skin on the right side of her face was stretched tight, grayish, and cracked like old leather. Her mouth didn't move, but she was watching me closely. Her one remaining eye locked onto mine with this awful stillness. My voice cracked when I spoke, and I don't even know why I asked it. But the words just came out like a reflex I couldn't stop. Are you San La Muerte? Her expression didn't change. She didn't react, didn't blink. But the moment I said that name, a heavy pressure slammed into my chest like someone punched the air out of me from the inside. I tried to breathe, but nothing came in. I opened my mouth again and again, but it felt like the oxygen just wouldn't enter. My lungs were locked up tight, like my body was rejecting the very act of staying alive. I pushed myself onto my knees, trying to crawl, but everything was shaking. My limbs felt numb, like they didn't belong to me anymore. The girl slowly stood up. She tilted her head slightly, and I swear I heard bones grinding as she did. She took one step forward, and I couldn't help it. I started sobbing, gasping like a fish dying on dry land. As I scrambled backward, I hit a low shelf and knocked over a stack of canned beans. The metal cans rolled around me, clattering like warning bells. I tried to stand but slipped in the spilled jam. My legs gave out and I crashed onto the bottom shelf. My head cracked against the corner and everything around me turned black. I don't remember how long I was out. It felt like hours, maybe minutes. When I opened my eyes, the fluorescent lights were humming again, and sunlight was leaking through the windows. My mouth was dry, my limbs were sore, and I was lying on the floor in front of aisle 14, surrounded by broken glass and empty shelves. But everything was clean. No jam, no cans, no broken jars, just me and a bruise the size of a mango on my ribs. I stumbled back to the security office. Inside were 3 men in suits standing around the monitors. One of them turned when I came in. His face was hard to read. They didn't ask how I was or if I was injured. They were watching the recordings over and over. Me walking through the aisles, me reacting to something they couldn't see, me getting pulled by nothing. They kept pausing, rewinding, pointing, but no figure, no girl. They asked me what had happened, and I told them the truth. I showed them the video I recorded on my phone. I even showed them the marks around my ankle, red and bruised, like something had gripped it tight. They looked at the phone, passed it around, but their faces didn't change. One said it was probably edited. Another said I probably had a seizure. None of them cared. They just wanted it done. Before I could protest, one of the managers handed me a form and told me I was being let go. No severance, no warning, just a vague explanation about protocol and liability. Now I work in a hardware store in the city, only during the day. I don't talk about that night with anyone. No one would believe it anyway. Not the video, not the story, not the name. My name is Jack. I'm a night security guard. I've forked warehouses, banks, even hospitals. Nothing ever rattled me before, but I took the job at Harlow Private University. I didn't ask questions. A week-long contract, good pay, no paperwork beyond an NDA. Easy money. The dean himself walked me through it. My orders were simple. Patrol the halls. Watch the cameras. Make sure no one gets in or out. 7 students were staying behind during some important experiment. They had cameras in their rooms. I figured it was for safety. The building was old, silent, the kind of silent that makes you hear your own breathing. I had a small office with 10 monitors showing every hallway, every room, every door had an electric lock controlled remotely. Once they clicked shut, there was no getting out without clearance. First night was uneventful. I drank coffee, played cards on my phone. Occasionally, I'd see some of the students shift in bed. Normal stuff. I thought it would stay that way. I didn't know yet that the silence was the last comfort I would have. The second night gave me something to think about. Around 2 a.m., 3 students got up from their bed. They were sleepwalking. No big drama. Just stood there, blank expressions, barely moving. It was weird, but harmless. I watched them with a knot forming in my stomach, unsure why it made me so uneasy. Still, something didn't sit right. I checked the doors, still locked. Nobody else was in the building. I told myself it was just stress. These kids were subjects in some experiment after all. Maybe they were drugged. Maybe it was part of the study. The camera showed them moving robotically, their feet dragging slightly across the floor, as if their bodies were heavier than they should be. Around 4 a.m., they crawled back to bed. No incident, no injuries. I locked it into my report and forgot about it. Figured it was above my pay grade. Deep down though, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slowly winding up, something getting ready to snap. What I didn't realize was that the third night wasn't going to be so forgiving. The third night started like any others. Quiet, cameras on, locks checked. By midnight, my mind was drifting. That's when the first alarm bell went off my head. One of the students, a guy named Darren, sat up on the bed, not gradually, but like a puppet yanked my invisible strings. The suddenness of it made my heart skip a beat. He just sat there, his head jerking to the side and small twitching movements. I leaned closer to the screen. He started screaming. Not words, just pure throat-shredding noise as if he was trying to rip his vocal cords out from the inside. He never left the bed. He just sat there, mouth was screaming at nothing. His eyes were wide open, glassy, and staring right through the walls. Another monitor flickered. Maya, another student, was standing by her door, pulling at the handle like an animal. It didn't open. She kept yanking again and again, head low, breathing heavy. Her shoulder jerked with every pull. It was desperate, frantic, like she knew something was chasing her, and she couldn't get away. Tension built so hard it made my skin crawl. Oh, monitors. 07 showed every student standing up now, even the ones that had been dead asleep every other night, silent, staring blankly ahead. One of them began bashing his head lightly against the wall in rhythmic thuds. Another twisting his fingers in impossible shapes, bones cracking in ways that made my stomach turn. I sat frozen, not blinking, not breathing right. This wasn't some sleepwalking episode. This was wrong. Deeply wrong. The cameras were recording everything, and the sound coming through the office speakers was a low hum, almost mechanical, like all students were humming under their own breaths without realizing. The worst one was in room 6. I never learned her real name. The roster called her Subject 6, while the others wondered or screamed. She just stood there in the center of a room facing the camera. Her skin too pale under the cheap fluorescent lights, almost translucent. Slowly, she tilted back her head. Then her jaw started opening wider and wider until it looked like her entire face would split in two. No sound came out, just a grotesque image burned into the screen. Her tongue rolled out thick and purple, hanging obscenely from her mouth like a chunk of rotten meat. The pressure in my head built until I had to look away. I stood up, cracked my neck, muttered something to myself, and then went to get coffee from the machine outside the office. Every step felt heavier than it should have, as if the very walls of the place were pushing me back. I was gone for 5 minutes, maybe less. When I came back, 6 of the students were tucked neatly in their beds again, sleeping like nothing happened. But room 6 was empty, sheets tingled, camera flickering weakly like it was struggling to stay alive. Panic hit me hard. My hands were shaking. I scanned every camera. Nothing. No movement. Doors still locked. No alarms triggered. The girl was simply gone, as if she had been swallowed by the walls. I left the office, flashlight in hand, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Every step echoed through the hallway. The lights above me flickered just enough to make my nerves bust like live wires. When I reached the girl's room, I opened the door slowly, empty sheets twisted like she'd fought them. The smell of sweat and something metallic hung in the air. I turned around to check the hallway. Every muscle in my body tensed to snap. Without warning, something heavy crashed into my back. I slammed into the floor, hands creeping against the tiles. Pain shot through my wrist. Before I could even shout, a weight pressed down against me, crushing. I twisted around. She was on me, eyes blank, mouth open unnaturally wide, making a soft, wet, choking sound. Her hands clawed into my face with jagger nails. I blocked it with my arm, but she sank her teeth deep into my flesh. Blood exploded from the wound. Hot and slick. Blood sprayed. I screamed. She bit down again, tearing a chunk of my skin from my forearm. I shoved her off with every ounce of strength I had left and stumbled backward, slipping in on my own blood. She crouched, body twitching, ready to leap again. She looked more like an animal than a person now. She bolted past me and down the hallway, moving with terrifying speed. I scrambled to my feet and limped back to the office, clutching my arm. Blood soaked my shirt. Every second felt like an hour. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed down the halls, casting everything in pulsing crimson. The phone rang. I hesitated but picked it up. Static hissed for a second before a voice spoke through. Hide. Lock yourself in a room. She cannot leave. We sealed all exits. The voice was dry, mechanical. Then the light went dead. No time to think. I stumbled into room 6 and slammed the door shut. Locked it. Pressed my back against it. Heart hammering like a drum about to burst. From outside, I heard scratching, then banging. The girl was trying to break in. She knew I was there. She wasn't mindless. She was hunting me. Every thought against the door made the frame shudder. Splinters started forming where her fingers clawed the wood. I sat there gasping, blood dripping from my arm, tears welding up without permission. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't strong. I just wanted to survive. I bit down on my sleeve to muffle the sobs building up in my throat. Finally, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Thuds, shouts. Another door slammed somewhere in the distance. I crawled tighter into the corner, praying that they were here for her, not me. The door burst open. 2 huge men in black tactical gear stormed in. They tackled the girl, pinning her down, forcing her onto the stretcher. She thrashed violently, but never screamed. Her body moved wrong, like something inside her was broken. They strapped her down with thick leather belts, injected something onto her neck, and her body went limp instantly. They held me up, carried me out. I kept my eyes shut tight, not wanting to see anything else. As they dragged me through the halls, I caught a glimpse of the others. All the students were back in their beds, sleeping peacefully, as if none of this had happened. I woke up in the hospital bed, arm wrapped in bandages, head pounding. 2 men in suits stood at the foot of my bed. You did good. Very good. We'll wire you a bonus. Monthly payments for a year. We expect your silence, though. I asked about the students. They're undergoing a highly experimental study. Extreme reactions are expected. That's all they gave me. I didn't argue. I signed the papers. I took the money. I never went back to Harlow. Never worked another night shift either. Some nights though, when the house is quiet and I'm too tired to move, I still hear her nails scraping wood, breath hissing through torn lips. Somewhere closer than I'd like to believe.